Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Trading the Markets. I'm Bijan Maleki, and I'm joined, of course, by Kris Bullock. Kris, how are you doing on this midweek?
Doing good, Bijan. It's a fun day so far. Our second
Lovely.
show in a row.
Yeah, right? Yeah, Kris and I were just on Crypto Distillery earlier this morning. If you're a Pro Crypto member or All Access member, be sure to check that out. A lot of great charts that Kris went through. And we're going to go through some more charts today. Just a reminder, guys, as always, this is not financial advice. We're just suggesting ideas and trades that we think are interesting to look at for you guys to have on your radar. And without further ado, let's just dive right into it. Kris, what's on your mind today in the market?
Yeah, so I wanted to start by just doing a quick top-down, zoom-out review of just, starting with Bitcoin, and then we'll dig into some of the trade ideas and the crypto dashboard and all of the other stuff. But just briefly looking at Bitcoin, I want to follow up on a chart that I talked about last week, just to sort of show how it has progressed since then. So last week we touched on the Bitcoin with the Ichimoku chart. And at that point in time, we had just pierced up above the top of this cloud, which was a really strong signal, which was kind of showing a longer term weekly trend reversal that we've been waiting for. So that was really good. And since then, you can see that we've basically held that top of that cloud as support. And then more importantly, we've had a crossover of these two lines here. This is called a bullish TK crossover. The blue line is called the conversion line. The red line is called the baseline. And the blue line is crossed up over, which is also a bullish signal. However, it's a bit of a muted bullish signal in that this crossover occurred like below the whole cloud. It would have been a little bit better if it would have occurred within the cloud, and even better still if we'd have gotten that signal above the cloud. But nevertheless, it is a step in the right direction. We continue to make baby steps in the right direction, further cementing this longer term weekly trend reversal. This is also illustrated here just with the bull market support band, which is this line here that we talk about. It too is now sort of flipped to support, which is really good to see. Price is above it, similar to how it was above the cloud. We can also see the bottom, the 21-week EMA moving average component of this indicator has flipped to the upside and is starting to work its way, towards eventually crossing over the red one, which hopefully we'll see in the coming weeks. Also, I kind of wanted to call out how we saw a ton of assets, and we maybe get into some of these other charts in a bit, but we saw a ton of assets with big green candles last week. We said, last week's show, it was like huge upside across the board. A number of assets were having double digit, some even had 100% gains in a single day. And so the market got a little bit overcooked, I feel like, in that moment. And so I'm not surprised at all to see things just kind of meander sideways since then. And we'll see a ton of assets basically coming back to their 10-day and some of them even to their 20-day moving averages. We're starting to see just a bit of a mean reversion across the board pretty much with nearly every chart that I've pulled up. And this is normal and, to be expected, honestly, when you get a big bump up like this. So I do feel like that we'll probably see a bounce off of some of these moving averages, whether it's the 10 or the 20, which is a little further away. We'll see. And continued upside from here. So really, I think things look good. If your favorite asset that you're holding is down maybe 10 or 15% in the last few days, it's nothing to worry about. After such a big bump up, it's totally normal to see. And, we're kind of back in a little bit of a buy the dip, getting ready to bounce, I feel like, zone for a lot of these. And it'll be, another leg up hopefully soon. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for big overview, and then we'll dig into the littler stuff now as we as we go along here.
Absolutely. Definitely bullish signs on the horizon. Crypto ETFs last week recorded their third best week on record of inflows, coming in at $3.4 billion. 3.2 of those billion went towards Bitcoin. So definitely some interesting bullish things on the horizon. Reminder, everyone, if you have any questions, if you have a coin or a trade or a chart that you want us to look at directly live on air, just throw it into one of our chats, whether that's on Twitter, on platform, and we'll try and take your questions live. Kris, so what are we thinking in the way of trades this week? I know you've been using Jamie's dashboard to help you identify some nice trades. What have you got for us this week?
Yeah, and once again, it's pulled up some really, really interesting stuff. I wanted to first comment on the dashboard by talking about the top 200 market cap versus top 200 equal weight, and note that over the past 30 days and over the past 7 days, the equal weight has led the charge somewhat, which is basically telling us that altcoins have outshone, the larger market caps. So it's not alt season yet necessarily, but we're starting to see stronger signs of strength within the lower market cap sector, which is interesting to me. But if we drill down a little bit, there was a couple that really stood out to me. One, I like to first just look at, what's got the highest percentage over the last 30 days. I'll typically start there. And so digital currencies led that pack. And then within that, I start to, look and see, well, what's going on within the rest of the stuff. So meme coins is generally high. General is high, which I'll get into in a second. Privacy has been the strongest really over the last, honestly, the last year, which is interesting. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and really this sector is just made up by Monero and Zcash. And I'm not going to necessarily recommend them because they're just sort of a unique thing. They're a bit of an outlier. So I want to go back to the general, and I'll sort this by the 30-day, just see what's done the best over the 30 days. This was interesting to me to see both BSV and BCH kind of leading the charge over the last 30 days, which again, I'm not going to recommend. There's a lot of sort of noise, if you will, in the upper half of this chunk here. But one of the ones that stood out to me was this ULTIMA coin. And, it's green across the board. Over the last year, it's up almost 400%. Over the last 6 months, up to 222%, 42 and so on and so forth. And so I'm like, I don't know if I even know what this is. What is this asset that, is seriously outperforming everything? Something I would have never stumbled on had I not been looking at this. And so I went and pulled up the chart, and I did a little bit of digging on what it was. It's a layer one. It's kind of a unique layer one that's sort of building its own ecosystem. And it's got some interesting, I guess, memetic properties, if you will. There's a lot going on socially with it, a lot of sort of gamification, a lot of things to kind of keep the audience interested in what's going on. It's been around a minute. It's not brand new. It's over a year old. So I was like, this is interesting. And if you look at the chart, back not too long ago at the end of December, it was down around 3,800. It's up around almost 20,000, which I'm like, what's up with this token supply? What's with these high prices? So I looked, and it's actually got a really low circulating supply. I think it's only got a cap of 100,000 tokens, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check here. Yeah, 100,000 is the max supply. So 100,000 tokens. Wow. The market cap is only 746 million. So we're talking, $20,000 tokens, but yet only a market cap of 746 million. So it's currently ranked at number 203 in the market cap ranking. So it's still a ways down there with still quite a bit of upside despite these massively high priced token prices. Very interesting. Also, this big volume breakout caught my eye. As I'm a kind of a favorite. These are a favorite thing of mine to see. So the big volume breakout was interesting, but we're seeing a bit of a pennant pattern here. If we look, it's a little bit lower highs kind of across the board, and then higher lows, which sort of forms this wedge that we talk about. Oops, if I can use this here, tried that. But anyway, yeah. So you get the idea. So kind of what I'm looking for here, to me, this isn't a buy yet. But what I would want to see is a breakout and a higher high above this level right here, where it kind of bounced off where the previous touch on the top of the wedge here was. So I feel like if price can get back above this around 21,800, to me, that would be an interesting breakout. That would signal that, it's got some upside potential. And then if you look at it on this trading alpha indicator too, it's starting to show signs of a trend reversal, breakout as well. Like we had red candles, we had a yellow track line, but now suddenly the track line flipped to green, and we don't have green candles yet, but we've got green dots, which signifies a potential trend reversal looming. So all of this is pointing to, a potential breakout. Also, this clouded area signifies a liquidity squeeze, which generally means a big price move is looming. And it looks like it could be to the upside given the way the trend is going. So again, it's too early to tell. I'm not saying buy in this yet, But if we do get a breakout, I think above this level where it sets a new high, basically sets a higher high from before, then I think this one has some room to move. Even though the price is really, really high at 21,000 a token or 20-ish, give or take right now, because the market cap is so low, because the supply is so low, of course you're going to get high token prices. So this one was interesting to me, and I wouldn't have found it without that dashboard. So again, thanks to Jamie Coots for calling that out. And then if we go back to the dashboard real quick, virtuals, was another one. If we kind of dig in a little bit more and look at some of these other sections, was it DeFi? Was it applications? I think it was. No, I can't find it. Hold on. No. Infrastructure. Yeah. And then AI. I was digging through AI. AI as a sector has really bounced quite a bit over the last month as well, that we can see. And so I drilled into the AI sector because I knew that, and we've been looking at it on our Monday show. And virtuals is a chart that we've called out before. Noticed it bounced really well out of the lows. And as if any of you have been following my ongoing monthly portfolio model portfolio reports, I held virtuals for a long time. I think my timing was just off on that because I got out of it perhaps a little too early after writing it down quite a bit. And I always had faith in it, and now it's proving my faith right, even though I sort of capitulated at the lows on that asset and sold it. But nevertheless, it's bouncing like I thought it would. It's up 120% over the last month. And if we pull up the chart on that briefly too, it's been really, really strong. It's got a nice bounce and big volume breakout too, which I've noticed. And it's sort of right back up to its bull market support band. Its moving averages are deviating further apart. It's not even, a lot of the assets that we've seen are coming down and touching their 10-day moving average, some of them even touching their 20-day moving average. Virtuals is barely just creeping inside the top of the Bollinger Band. So it's showing sort of outsized relative strength, I feel like, right now. And, it's definitely got the wind behind it, and it's running pretty good. So, another one that caught my attention, again, from the dashboard. So solid chart for sure.
Yeah, nice find on both of those. One thing about ULTIMA that I noticed while you were talking about it with the volume, I mean, obviously beautiful volume spike on that coin and recently, but also historically, it's had pretty consistently nice sized volume as well with that nice breakout recently. So definitely something promising and worth putting on your radar. Great use of the dashboard. So we do have a question coming in from Sigma on YouTube. And Sigma, I'm glad you asked this question because that leads me into one of my trade ideas. And then we can actually have a nice little conversation between Kris and I on what we think would be the better. So Sigma's question is, what is the better SWI beta play, Deep or CETUS? So actually, I want to highlight Dead Oxide SWI, goes by Slayer, or formerly known as Slayer in our Discord. So he put in a trade idea for CETUS, which is the #1 DEX on SWI. Really like this. He's been talking about CETUS for a long time. CETUS had a very recent breakout. I think it's up over 100% over the last 14 days. It's still 58% off from its all-time high. So I really do like this as a trade right now because, listen, you guys already know I'm a big believer in SWI, but I think ultimately, if you think SWI is going to continue to run, this isn't a bad beta play to really capture that upside, especially being that it's 58% off of its all-time high and should run further than that as SWI goes as well. So with that being said, Kris, what do you think? Like, what do you think is a better, like, if we had to take one beta play for SWI, what are we going to take? Are we taking Deep? Are we taking CETUS? And let's throw LOFI in there as well, because I know you've been interested in that recently also. So what are we taking as a beta on SWI?
Well, let's look at the charts so we can get a little bit of an objective stance first. So CETUS looks okay. Like, it hasn't been as strong as Deep has overall. Deep started stronger out of the gate, which we'll get into in a second. But CETUS has definitely had a nice bounce here for sure. I mean, it really recovered a lot of its losses, rapidly over the last week, like a lot of stuff has. And it's recovered its bull market support band, and it looks to be sort of reversing its longer term trend. So definitely credit where it's due. I do think CETUS looks good. I got to say, though, I think Deep looks better. And we've talked about Deep a lot on our show. As you know, it's a very popular topic. And it really had a much stronger breakout. I think this candle here was like a 2x in one day, basically. And it broke through its resistance. It's kind of come back down. It's testing at a support right now. It's right at the 10-day moving average also, but it's just stronger overall. It's well above its bull market support band, which you can see kind of hidden in here. I know this chart's drawn up quite a bit more than the last chart because we look at this asset a lot. So, but nevertheless, I do think that Deep has it just looks better structurally. It's got a better looking chart overall. It's got better relative strength, and to me, I think it's just got more momentum. So I would go on that. Now, between that and LOFI, I mean that's a good question too. Let's or actually I got it right here. LOFI is a little bit different because it's newer, and because it's just a straight meme. But that doesn't, that shouldn't dissuade you necessarily from holding it. It just being a straight meme. There's plenty of. I have a lot of money in memes right now, so I mean they're entirely valid. Is my point. This one's tricky. You could argue that LOFI has a little bit more room on the upside because its market cap is lower than Deep. I think Deep is above $1 billion already, if I'm not mistaken, whereas LOFI is, what is it, 28 million, I want to say, something like that. LOFI's low. So yeah, so LOFI, obviously it takes far less money to move the needle with LOFI. So, but also it's that much more risky because it's further out the risk curve because the market cap is lower to begin with. So you have to kind of factor all that in. A safer bet, quote unquote, would be Deep. But that's not to say that, LOFI couldn't ultimately outpace it in outright percentage gains again because of its lower market cap to begin with. So I think if LOFI gets a nice bounce here and catches a solid bid and continues this trend upwards, then yeah, I think it warrants having some exposure to it. I actually got a few percent exposure to LOFI last week off of this bounce too, off of this nice volume breakout as well. So I don't know. And then where does that leave CETUS in the end? It's funny. I struggle with, I don't know, something about DEX tokens for me just don't appeal as much. I don't think they generally go as well. I mean, there's exceptions here and there, but even the top performing DEX tokens, your Uniswaps and stuff like that over the years, they've never really blown up and gone to the moon and been like this sort of outsized gains beta play that everybody thought that they would be. And so I kind of want to lump CETUS into that category a little bit for better or worse. And so to me, it just doesn't appeal based on that. Whereas Deep has a unique use case because it's just liquidity across the entire basically Sui ecosystem. And then of course, LOFI being just a straight up meme, which is just pure speculation, but that can do well too. So of those three, I would say Deep and LOFI, and of those two, man, I flip a coin again. It kind of just depends on your risk, however you want to, your risk profile, I guess, if you will, and sort of how you want to approach that. I would own a little bit more of Deep maybe than I would of LOFI, just given its sort of stability, longer term stability. We know it's not going anywhere. We know it's a deeply entrenched, core piece of infrastructure within the Sui ecosystem. And so I think if Sui does well, Deep is automatically going to do well. Whereas LOFI just has to kind of keep people's attention, which it very well could, but it's a completely different dynamic going on there. And so Deep is the safer bet. LOFI is more the home run swing of the two, I think.
Yeah, very well said. Sigma, I would definitely go with Deep. Between CETUS and Deep, I would go with Deep for sure, just because I like the being the liquidity layer. I like that narrative and just that use case better than an actual DEX use case if I'm choosing between those two. CETUS, though, I do think it's interesting just because people are so excited about Sui right now. So I'm just wondering if it could have a similar type of trajectory that Radium and Orca had on Solana last cycle, But then again, Kris like brings up such a great point about kind of that DEX narrative into this cycle. So I don't necessarily know if CETUS could break out from that. But regardless, I do think they can get back to their all-time high. So you do have some upside there.
Yeah.
Very well said. So one more trade I want to call out as well. This is purely a meme play, guys. Is House Coin. It's been all over the timeline. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen it already. It's currently, I think right before Kris and I got on air, it was just above 100 million on market cap. When we first talked about this on Monday, it was at about 50 or so million market cap. So it did see a 2x. I think it's just an interesting thing to monitor from a narrative perspective. It feels tough to say to buy this right now or to kind of put that on there because I myself haven't even bought it yet. There are some people that I really like on Twitter that do see this kind of going the ways of a fart coin and having a nice little rise here on out. But I think it's something to look at and just also it's a good one to like study and see because Housecoin has been around for a month and then all of a sudden in the last few days it just skyrocketed. So I think watching some of that, seeing how that narrative played out and seeing if you can apply that to something else with some dry powder down the line could be a good learning lesson. So I definitely wanted to mention that in case it wasn't on your radar so you guys could check that one out. And then also I want to go back really quickly to Deep and LOFI on the market cap. Deep is at a 450 million market cap and LOFI is 28 million market cap. So yeah, definitely a lot of upside on both still to capture.
I must have confused it with something. I thought it was around $1 billion, but
definitely. Let's hope it gets there.
Yes, for sure. So I wanted to touch on I brought this up on our Monday show too, but there's this website I've been using called CryptoRank. And one of the tools I use to try and find what's hot at any given time is I pull up this list and it basically sorts assets by the amount of time since it last set a new all-time high. And then I filtered it by a market cap of 400 million. So I didn't want to have anything too low because lots of stuff comes out every day that's, of course, sets new all-time highs all the time. So I wanted to filter it by 400 million on the low side so that it was really only established assets, that were showing up on this list. And one of the ones we talked about on the Monday show was this Solayer or Layer token. Since that time, it has gone on to set yet another new all-time high just today. So again, I thought that this list was super handy in identifying that. And if we look at the chart, actually, which I've got right here, it's a really super interesting chart, and it continues to intrigue me because it's just this sort of super steady grind upwards, with just plodding along, poking new all-time highs probably every week or two, and just really steady, and it's just really interesting price action to me, and it's so far so good. I mean, it hasn't really. I'm wondering what's going to ultimately break this trend, or when it's going to close below the 20-day moving average. But in the almost 2 months that it's been open, it's just been a real steady climb. But you like to see that with brand new assets, that aren't out very long. Typically, you get these really erratic, weird price action with huge candles up and down, very volatile, and you just can't base any insight off of it. Whereas this chart, you've got a clear structure that's in place, a clear trend that's in place, and a very, very sort of clear invalidation level. That at some point, if it does break either of the, if it does break this moving average and close below it, that's a very clear signal that something suddenly is different. Whereas in a much more erratic, volatile chart, you wouldn't really know. You'd be like, well, it went down 90% last week and it went back up 100% the day after. And it's like, you don't really know if you should get in or get out. But for some reason, this chart is just very, very clear. And so that's kind of what appeals to me about it, So I don't own any of this, to be clear, but for some reason, again, it caught my eye because it just today it set another new all-time high. So whatever's going on over here is interesting, but it's, I wanted to talk about it because it was an interesting chart, and I wanted to shout out the CryptoRank website because, again, I use that all the time, for not just newer stuff like this layer, but for any asset. Like, I want to know the last time, whatever, Bitcoin hit an all-time high, or SPX, or any of these other tokens that we're following. It's cool to know at a quick glance how far they are out from their most recent all-time highs. So I like that website, and I kind of keep that tab open in the background all the time and check it every week or two because it's useful for that.
Great shout out on that tool. Let's up and to the right,
Up
we
into the
love that
up into the right.
direction for those for
Yeah,
charts.
exactly.
Direction we want to see. So let's take this last question from Andy on X. He wants us to take a look at another chart and see how HBAR is looking these days.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's look. I would say okay. Let's zoom out to the weekly time frame just to kind of get a little bit more perspective on sort of just the general long-term trajectory. What do we got here? It's funny. It's been, I mean, largely sideways. It's been all of 2023, kind of going up a little, all of 2024 going down, and then a big run up at the end of the year. I remember when this pumped, it was kind of it was part of the Dino coin pump,
Yep.
as it was, talked about with new government programs and things like that. So it definitely caught a huge bid off of that. But we can see really after that initial peak, volume has bled out. And price has bled out, honestly, too, for that matter. And this happened to a lot of those that were in that mix, probably more than
every one
I
of
would say
them.
three, every one of them. I think XRP maybe has held up the best out of that bunch, but even it sort of has lost its trend as well. Some of them bled out all the way back and gave all of these gains back. So you could argue this has held up okay. I'm kind of curious looking at this. I feel like this is calling for a fib retracement indicator real quick just to see what it came down to. So it came back down to the 0.5 level. That's actually pretty good. I feel like it's holding up relatively well, but not as good as some other stuff. And this volume honestly concerns me. This volume tells me that people are still holding this, but I would like to see, we've seen a ton of stuff come out with big volume spikes leading out of the lows, showing that there's a lot of renewed interest in these, coming out of the sort of the reversal of this downtrend that we've been in. And we're not really seeing above average volume. We're not really seeing higher highs set in volume. So, you can see each of these big green volume spikes on these big green buy days. Each one is lower than the previous one. So I don't have a good, strong, sense that this is going to rally and continue to run. This is telling me that the market isn't necessarily into this, and each green pump is basically getting sold off each time. Like, it's sort of exit liquidity, and people are selling into these rallies instead of buying into them. Now, granted, price has reversed. I'll give it that, credit where it's due there. But it still really isn't back up above its bull market support band. It's sort of being rejected on the bottom side of it. So structurally, it doesn't look as good as a number of other assets that we've looked at, and has some catching up to do. Also, we can see kind of, if we draw a trend line right here, we can see that it hasn't really broken this downtrend structure. It's sort of right at its resistance, I guess, if you will, sort of on the downtrend structure. So it has some work to do. It incurred a lot of structural damage. It has some work to do to really show that the market, that this token is back in favor with the broader crypto market. And right now I'm not seeing that, both in volume and price, for that matter. So yeah, that's what I see.
That large spike in volume that we saw in that chart just tells me that it was primarily narrative driven. And then we see the proof that on the technical side of things and the fundamental side of things, it's losing its luster, if you will, after that big pump. All right. Well, actually, before we end here, I do want to see, though, because you did mention it looks okay, right? But let's just real quickly before we end, compare this to how Bitcoin, if we can.
Yeah, like the
Just so
HBAR Bitcoin
yeah,
chart.
exactly. Yeah, just so Andy has
Yeah.
a better picture of what's going on with his HBAR bag.
Yeah, no, good call. So a little worse overall. You can see it's a little bit even further still below the bull market support band. So structurally, it's worse off. It's actually lost ground to Bitcoin in this last little bit. I mean, obviously, yes, it outpaced it in that rally at the end of the year, but since then, it's just lost ground to Bitcoin. And if you look at it on a larger trend, outside of this rally at the end of the year, it basically peaked against Bitcoin in the previous cycle peak back in September of 2021 and has just continued basically a long, slow downtrend bleed out against Bitcoin ever since then. So you're much, much, much better off just holding Bitcoin in this scenario, honestly.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
had a
so good
feeling.
point. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you for the question. I hope that gives you some insight on your HBAR. And guys, thank you everyone for the questions. That is going to do it for today's session. As always, if you have any questions, always feel free to put them in the live chat. If you thought of something, put it in. Maybe we can get back to it next week. And until then, we'll see you guys on Monday for our longer session TA, and we'll see you back again next week on Wednesday. Have a great week, everyone.
See everybody.